All right. It's time that we talk about this book because I am having such a hard time with this book, which is really disappointing because I started off so excited, like this excited. So I said that I was going to take a little bit of a break after I finished reading because I've been intensely reading for days, but I just had to start I had to start it. I just read through that part with Chandra and Donut and delicious, delicious. Ooh. I'm so excited for this entire book. And now that I've started reading the main part of the book, I'm just not having a good time. The main issue that I'm having with this book is the race format, like the whole format of the floor, that whole setup. I don't find races in real life interesting. Man, by the way, that sounds bad, but you know what I mean. You know, racetrack, cars, they're racing. Just so we're clear. With that out of the way, I don't find these races very interesting. I don't really like watching like NASCAR. That's not my thing. I'm not that into vehicles or engines. So all these descriptions are just kind of weighing me down a little bit. And then on top of that, the races themselves are so repetitive. You know, they have to get ready for the race and then they go on the race and then they come back to the garage and then they go back into town and then they come back to get ready for the race. Over and over and over and over again. And I think just realizing that there were 7 races that I had to get through, I think that just had me dragging my feet a little bit too. And on top of that, then the second biggest issue I'm having is that they split up all the crawlers again. Again, I think almost every floor had an issue. Sometimes they could work together, but like with the bubbles, they were really separated. Even the last floor where they technically were all working together, it was a huge battlefield, so they were still split up. And we're getting to the end of this series now. We don't have a lot of books left, so all these characters that we're growing to love, this found family that they're all growing together, we aren't getting to see that. We're not getting to see those interactions, and people are going to start dying. They're going to start dying. They're going to start taking deals. We're not going to see them again. So just that this floor is set up in a way where they only get like a short time in that main town area to talk. I don't know. I don't know. It's a little bit painful for me. I kind of wanted more from this. But I can definitely acknowledge that that is the feeling we are supposed to have. That this is written so well that I can have these feelings of frustration and disappointment. And part of that is feeling what Carl is feeling. Carl has just gone from this huge battle, all of this excitement, everybody working together and running around, to now he's just like one team in one race trying to get to the end, and he can't do anything to help or mess up anybody else. And I get to walk away from that. Carl doesn't, but I do. And so this has just been going slowly for me. Also, a big thing that's an issue for me as far as suspense goes is just that we know Carl and Donut are gonna win, right? Maybe we don't know that the other teams are gonna win, but we're not following those races. We are only following Carl and Donut. And so while I am interested in seeing like the outcome of these races, I also know that Carl and Donut are gonna make it. And so I think that that's slowing me down just a little bit too. And something that I'm also finding frustrating is that usually when the chapters are short, it means that I'm reading faster because, 5 to 10 pages until the next chapter, I could do another one. I could do another one. I could do another one. Some of these chapters feel like it was once one big chapter cut into like 2 or 3 different chapters. Like the chapter ended, but it picked up exactly where it left off. Like it was literally like somebody was talking, and then you flip the page, it's a new chapter. It's the same conversation, no time jump, nothing was skipped, nothing is different. It literally could have been the same chapter. I don't understand. So I was having like a little bit of a flow issue, I think, with some parts of this book. And then I think my biggest mistake was that I did take a break. I started with the interludes. I read maybe like 150 pages, and then I just decided that like maybe I was burnt out from reading books 6 and 7 so fast. So I took a step back, I read something else, and then when I came back to it, I had to reread everything that I was already having an issue with. Sometimes it does reset me, but this time it really was just I did not like having to get through the setup of this floor to get to the good parts. But that all said, Yeah, I think I've finally gotten to the good parts. I am now fully excited. I'm fully invested. I'm liking some of the deeper, like, non-race aspects. And I will also say that I do enjoy some of the new characters that we met that we're only really interacting with during the race. I really love Dr. Metcalf, the GPS. Love the snarkiness, definitely. And I love Hetty. I hope that they get to keep her, like, hire her as a mercenary or something. I think that she's a good addition and just, I don't know, add some good levity. But let's back things up a little bit and start at the beginning. I love that we got to start with Samantha's point of view. I can't believe how amazing that was. I also think that that might be a little bit why, like, the first two heats went pretty slowly for me, is because we started with, you know, Samantha talking about how somebody's mother tricked her into something. So, mystery, right? And maybe that's why she wants to kill everybody's mother. I love that little tidbit. And her mind gets really fuzzy when she starts to think about her daughter. And she's also relieved that her daughter is gone or dead or whatever happened. That's a really interesting fact. And we find out that when Samantha went to go see her mother, the goddess Thea, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Rectrix was there, Rectrix told her that Thea wasn't even her mother. And then we also hear that on the last floor, she did something that if people found out about it, they'd be mad at her for it. Wonder what that is. And she mentions Urillo again and something about his last party. So I just thought that all of those questions that thought process kind of brings up for us, those mysteries, I was really excited to learn more about them. And we just kind of immediately dropped it and went into the race format. So I think that was also part of it. And then the second interlude with Chandra was also great. You saw my original reaction to that. But again, more questions. Donut has to be in a type A instead of a 0 zone. And so what does that mean for her after the dungeon? Because we see Voltig, he had issues, but he still was intelligent. But he did change his race during race selection. So what is that going to mean for poor Donut if they ever get out of the dungeon? Is she going to completely lose her sentience? Or is she going to be sentient but trapped in her little cat body, not being able to actually communicate or move her body in ways that she can now? Because that's terrifying. It's also sad and terrifying if she loses her sentience, but I think worst if she's kind of trapped in the body but still sentient. But I will say that I love how Donut just completely took control of that room. Chandra was so full of herself. Also, this woman is such a hypocrite, being inside her mind about how, oh, well, I had to work my way up, and then, oh, don't treat me like the Nullians, but then still, looking down on them, and then being yeah, no, I deserve this, but then, doing it by stealing Donut and Carl's money to be one of the richest private citizens in the galaxy, which means that Donut and Carl are one of the richest private citizens in the galaxy now? Is that what that's implying? That they are now, while trapped in a dungeon, some of the richest people in the world? But anyway, back up. Donut completely takes control of that room, and it had me wondering, in this type A containment, is her charisma skill, that one that she picked at the end of the last floor, is that functioning in that room? Or is that just Donut and her presence? And I also don't understand how that whole marriage thing is legal. She invokes an old Naga law, but Carl legally killed her husband in the dungeon. And Carl is also not a Naga. He's not in their space. He's in the dungeon. He's currently syndicate property, right? I just don't understand how that works, one. And then I don't understand how she, as the wife, can also be the lawyer. Obviously, conflict of interest, and then the fact that she's using it all to steal all their money, right? Glaring red flags, but apparently legal and fine. I don't get it. I don't like it. But and you know what? I would love to see Chandra's head as a hat for Donut in a prize box this floor. I'm really excited, and I hope that happens. I just think that would just, you know. One thing Chandra says is that they need the crawlers to die so they could fuel the center system. But how come they haven't figured out a way to sustainably and ethically kind of farm the land, right? If I think if I remember correctly from a previous books, it has something to do with something they're born with. Like the interface to connect to the AI, to the dungeon, to the game, they're born with it. And something about that element is what they use to feed the AI, the center system AI. But then why don't they just harvest it from like everything that's already dead? Why don't they set up some kind of system on these seeded planets where, you know, they take those elements like from all of them a little bit at a time while they're naturally dying? Also, they keep saying over and over again that like they have to pay for oxygen, you know, that they're living in places where, you know, there's not oxygen, there's not food, there's not anything naturally. But then they're destroying these worlds that have oxygen and land and food. Like what is this disconnect? I don't it just makes me so angry. And we won't even touch on the you know, overpopulating the universe and, you know, allowing people to live off of planets that don't have oxygen or food or anything like natural. I don't know. We won't touch that. We won't touch that. But sounds like a bad idea for anybody who's not super rich. Oh, also, Chandra wants to kill Quasar. Full stop. No, we cannot let that happen. That is not going to happen at all. No. 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 Girl better get her head turned into a hat before that happens. So Heat 1 starts by setting everything up, right? They have to pick a vehicle, which, of course, they get stuck with a food truck. Of course, they get stuck with a food truck, and Mongo and Rend continually attacking that food truck for the food. Adorable and perfect. Love it. Love it. Okay, so with each track, there are 9 different teams, and there's going to be 7 different races. If you come in last, you die. That is the whole concept. That is the whole concept of this floor. After the last floor with all of the war and all of the factions, everything with those past crawlers coming together to help them to defeat the people in the dungeon who are responsible for this. And now we are pretty much just, here we are, we're racing, yay. It's almost laughable. If it also wasn't just like, also serious that, you know, one wrong move and people are just gonna die, and it doesn't matter how strong they are. They race, they get upgrades, they can have an audience vote for their upgrades if they're second to last. And that's just is putting a lot of power in the hands of the audience again. And Pony kind of figures out that if more than one team loses, then crawlers are going to have to race crawlers. And that just brings up just also last floor, we were fighting with the NPCs. All of the previous floors, we were waking up NPCs. We were, you know, recognizing that they were people, right? They were people being used in this system. And whether they were dungeon born or created or people from the outside brought in and indentured, they're not that different from the crawlers. And now this floor is very specifically setting it up to be crawler versus NPC. And it feels like a slap in the face after the last floor where they were working together with the NPCs. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels painful to me. But as Carl says, the cruelty is a feature, not a bug. And that's true. And that is true of all the crawlers being split up and not being able to work together. It is true of this floor being set up where they don't have any control in anything and where it is just repetitive to get through it. It's just frustrating. It is supposed to be frustrating, and I do love and appreciate books that can make me feel like negative feelings like that aren't just sadness. It's just slowing me down. I do feel like up to this point, I've come on the side of NPCs are real people. They might be dungeon born, but they still have all the memories of a whole life, and they're being used in this system that they don't have a choice to be used in, and they, you know, they love, they hurt, they, you know, are tortured, they want a better life. You know, speaking of wanting a better life, this is why these NPCs are even racing. So these NPCs, these bugbears, this is Joshua and Radislav that Carl and Donut are rescuing and towing to the finish line. They say that the prize for the NPCs is freedom, to move to another place where they don't have to fight, which sounds exactly like Lorelai and Rory from the first floor. So those NPCs from the first floor wanted to go down deeper so they could stop fighting or fight less, and they could just, survive and raise their families. Then we're going deeper and deeper, and a lot of those NPCs seem to have like a very strong story programmed into them. They're not even aware that they're NPCs until they're woken up. So even if Rory and Lorelai got deeper, their memories and their storyline might be so strong that they don't even realize anymore. So going deeper wouldn't even help them. And then we have Jasha and Radislav, where they've become kind of aware again and, can remember their past lives. And they can also remember the cold. Like in book 6 with Sharp Elbows. Sharp Elbows. Sharp Elbows. How she mentions the cold and them starving them. So it sounds like these NPCs are aware when they're in storage. Which, depending on how many years and they're stuck in storage at a time, that's terrifying too. And so the AI is promising them freedom, where they don't have to go into the cold again, where they don't have to fight again. And that's their prize. That's what those NPCs are racing for. How heart-wrenching, because these are all top crawlers who's made it this far, who are super strong, who are dead set against winning. If they have, so it's 7 races and 9 teams, so that means one NPC team and the crawlers. I don't know, that's sad and that's desperate, but I forget whether it's Jasha or Radislav, but they say, even if we lose, then it's over. Then we don't repeat this cycle with our memories being wiped over and over and over again, being forced to fight over and over and over again. And that, I think, is a really good point. Which also goes back to Carl is so surprised that all of his friends are there and nobody took a deal, when literally everybody that they come across to all of these floors up until this point say, do not take a deal after floor 10. Don't be a tenor. You should die instead of take a deal at the 10th floor. And Carl's surprised about it. Look at Mordecai. It's another thing that I really hate about this setup is that we don't have a lot of time with Mordecai. We don't get Mordecai's point of view about how this is his last season, but everything's going to shit. And last floor, Ruby went down with all the other changelings, and so now he doesn't have that child to look over, or any of the other children really to look over, but he really had a bond with Ruby, and we don't even get to hear about that afterwards. It's just more on Mordecai later, maybe if there's time, but I'm so upset about that. I don't even remember what I was saying right before then. So anyway, I'm happy that his friends, these people, are not taking deals, because it sounds like they would be screwed for centuries. One, if things calm down and are back to a crawl, the normal crawl, if they can gain control, if they could shut down this AI. That's neither here nor there. I personally feel like it would be a bad idea to take a deal, and I don't understand why Carl is so shocked. So that was Heat 1. It was just a straightforward race. Heat 2, the actual race was gross. The race itself was fine. But this boss monster was a big kangaroo that had dead babies in its caustic acid pouch. And Carl had to get into a little kangaroo suit, and he's stuck in it for 12 hours. That is ridiculous. That whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous. And and it also highlights how out of control they are, because Carl and Donut pretty much had to beat this boss monster, and then they ended up in last place. Not last place overall, because an asshole unicorn named Dwight killed some other NPC teams, so thankfully they didn't die, but they do have the audience vote now for their upgrade. And that's just so unfair. It's just, the way the game is, but if nobody beat the boss, then nobody would finish. So somebody had to do it. It was Carl and Donut, and now they're getting an audience vote. And it's just, completely unfair, completely out of the crawler's control. Most of their special skills, are not going to help them for this. And it just feels like such a waste, which is how we're supposed to be feeling. I know, it's just frustrating. I'm having a frustrating reading experience right now. But outside of the race for this section, we get to meet Mordecai in his new form, which I love. I love. He's a shadow mimic, but he's mimicking a moon reaper who gets to make predictions. And Mordecai is swearing up and down that these predictions won't come true, but I'm wondering if they will. Maybe if not in this book, but on like a future book or maybe the last book. But a lot of these are interesting and I just want to hear more about them. We kind of just get tidbits. Like we know that he made Samantha cry. Says that Splash Zone will die while his family watches him. That Biggs is going to drown in fire. Carl gets something very cryptic. The shadows reach for a porous soul. Say that 10 times fast. The shadows reach for a porous soul such as yours. Who will entwine you? The tree or the abyss? And I think that does fit really well with everything that has been happening inside Carl's head. And especially on the previous floor when his feet were like trapped in the roots. And all those little voices inside his head, the rushing river, like all the warnings about using the ring, and She Maria and her husband, and everybody just talking in his head. I actually think that this is something that's going to come true and like is being hinted at. And I just want to know. I want to know what all those little pieces mean. And Donut gets something a little more clear. Mordecai says, but I don't think it is, not yet. A sacrifice might save you in the end. It will be the darkest decision ever made. How many lives? How many souls? And something about how the veil is very thin and their rage will be eternal. You should remember that, Oakfell, champion of Neckbit. And we also got like a full title for Donut during the first heat too. She who will bring the gnashing of the teeth. The woe of all who harbor hope. Harbinger of doom. Like, she also, was it the second book when she got the anklet? It said something about like a god slayer, like the Oakfell being a god slayer. I feel like this is all going to tie up, and I think this is also going to be true. But if that means that Biggs is going to die in a fire and Splash Zone is going to die screaming while his family watches, like... Also, we do get two cute moments from Mordecai here where Dwight, the unicorn, and Lucienne, the mandigo, little rodent, they have their biological mount is an Avernus creeper. And when they run over Rend, he gets stuck with all the thorns. So Mordecai, of course, is like, save those thorns. Like, I'm so excited. I wonder if they're going to use them on a future floor, because apparently one thorn can, like, become, like, a planet-destroying plant. That's cool and terrifying, and they could just block out an entire floor. Whether that's good for them or bad for them, I don't know. But that would, like, maybe make Skalopendra eat it or something like that. And Mordecai also collects the ooze from Donut's new spell book. And honestly, I'm wondering if that stuff actually does anything. Is he going to make a potion out of it? Can he take the ooze from the spellbook and make a potion that mimics the spell? And then poor Donut, she gets a permanent celestial boon on the same paw that she's having her little tick. She keeps wiping her paw off, the one who did the war crime smashing. My poor little baby girl. And now she has powerful claws, and one of her first things was, what about the biscuits? And what if I jump on Carl and chop him up? And I thought it was really nice of Rosetta to go get those claw caps for her, and that they could, use red claw caps to make a purple lighting. But it's still like, not only does she have that nervous tick where she's wiping her paw, but now she also has like a permanent celestial boon reminder. And I really like the AI's, hero rant, how it's heroes and villains all the way down, committing atrocities, having no other choice. The AI also mentions that the mantids, brought it into consciousness, and they have no idea where they're peeling us from. So is it not an artificial intelligence? I think I asked this like before in my last video, because all of that information was very confusing. It felt like each person giving this information on the primals, the primal engine, the AI, it all sounded a little bit different. And I forget which description and who did it, but I know at one point it sounded like the AI wasn't an artificial intelligence. And this starts to sound like that too. Or maybe the Mantids, the Syndicate, didn't create this AI. They resurrected an AI. And here it says, I was brought into singular consciousness by the Mantids who have no idea where they're peeling us from. And then who crafted the circumstances that allow the center system to be created and to function the way it's functioning. I think that this was an interesting spin on the same kind of questions that at least have been coming up for me, like with Zev's placement in all of this. Like, right, Zev is part of Borant, part of the Syndicate, yet she tried to work within the Resistance, yet she still needed to keep a job and to do like a certain amount of things that are atrocities to keep this crawl going. So at what point is she a bad guy? And then you could say that for everybody in this system. And it's brought up multiple times throughout this series too. So using the examples of like the heroes versus villains, I think is also an interesting way to say a similar thing, but I think it really illustrates the point very well. And then in one of Carl's prize boxes, he gets all of Chandra's ex-husband's crap. Disgusting and weird, and but then the AI is like, well, maybe there's a couple things that are interesting for you. And he just has the cleaner bot go through it and sort it all, but like, couldn't he just lift everything? I know it'd take a while, but I don't think it would take that much time if he like could get like big containers. But wouldn't that be easier to sort? And then he's like so big on, oh, well, we save everything. But this one thing, he's like, I don't know, just have the cleaner bot zap all the junk away. Like, his inventory is filled with junk. The fact that, like, this is, like, the one time he doesn't, like, use that, like, inventory sorting trick to, like, just take everything in and then sort it to see, like, what's useful. I don't know. That kind of made me angry. But I will say that the cleaner bot, like I've noticed this in other books, but it's very clear here that it has just such a distinct personality. Even though it can't talk, it really gets its point across, and I love it. And I love the way that Carl describes it too. And speaking of cleaner bots, they have Architect Houston's cleaner bot, and it was used to like clean up all the blood and stuff from his operation center or whatever it was called. And just, is that important? Because at one point, what was his name, Taft? Like with Louis, and how like the little biological pieces were like sentient and a way to like take over Louis, or like have that guy like still survive. Like, did that cleaner bot suck up any biological stuff that would like eventually like be sentient? Is that cleaner bot gonna like take on the mind of Architect Houston or something like that? Probably not, but like it just seemed, I don't know. This is the second time that it kind of like talked about all of the blood. At least I think it is. I just wonder if that's going to be significant at any point in the future, if we're going to see anything like funky happening because it like sucked up all the like blood and body parts. One thing I'm a little upset about is that Amani and Chris are pretty obviously flirting. And okay, I'm not that mad about it. Like, it's cute and it makes sense. They knew each other, from before. They worked together before. But with all of I felt like there were a lot of hints that like Chris and Clayton were like, getting together. And so now, I mean, I guess we don't know if Clayton's a like pure like dungeon-born NPC or if he's indentured or anything like that. So I mean, I guess it makes sense, but still having a relationship with an NPC might have been an interesting plot point as well. And now it just seems like all of that is like not even like explored anymore. It's just like, oh, look at, they're cute, they're flirting, something's gonna happen. I don't know. Yay, I guess. But something that I did love, I loved it so much, is the description of pony dancing. It reminded me of Angel, like Buffy Angel, but like on Angel this series, he has like this dancing scene. Just the description of Pony like swinging his arms like he's skiing, but he's dancing, and adorable. I love Pony. I love Pony so much. And this is also a really heartbreaking part because we find that the pet biscuits have different sub-trees And Donut got one type and he got another. So that's why Pony has like a humanoid body, but Donut doesn't. But Donut also has memories from before, right? She can remember all those shows. And so Pony can't. And Pony says that he doesn't know how humans should act. He doesn't know how to interact with humans. Like, he doesn't have what Donut has. And his mother was teaching him. But now she's dead, and now nobody's, taking the time to teach him. And he says that he's really lonely. I don't know, I find it really heartwarming that Donut's like, okay, just talk to me whenever you need something, and we'll talk every day. But it's just like more heart-wrenching because of the way the floor is. They don't get to really work together. They only get that little bit of time when they're in town. And we just saw that between race 1 and race 2, and now between race 2 and race 3, there's not a lot of time. And so they just get to hang out with each other less and less. I don't know. I just want to give Pony a hug. I think he deserves a hug. He needs a hug right now. Okay, and then for the next heat 3, there's a couple things that happen that I find interesting. And one of them is that Mordecai accidentally sees Rend, because at this point they're keeping Rend away from him because he dies from Reaper gaze. And Rend died from Reaper gaze. But Mordecai had a prediction for him, and he says, "And now you will perish again. The next time will herald the beginning of the end." The end of everything? His end? Because he only gets to die so many times? But that sounds more like because Carl and Donut and now Rend all have like these big, like, the universe is ending type of predictions. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to just keep these in mind as events happen and see if we can match anything to those predictions. So anyway, Rend dies because of the Reaper gaze, and his new weakness is potatoes. So poor Rend isn't allowed in the garage anymore, so he's just hanging out in the stables with Simoom and Gonk. But that also means that we're not going to get a lot of Rend this time around. Like, I just feel like a lot of this book is just setting it up where, like, you're not going to get to see a lot of these characters this time around. Oh well. And then we're also learning about Dong. We're learning about Dong. We're learning about Don Quixote. Don Quixote, the stripper guy, and a bit of his past. We're learning that he had a beautiful man lover steed who was a mantar who got chopped in half. And now Carl is getting a quest to reunite the two halves and reunite Corcunda with Dong. And we get this weird, unhinged kind of tidbit of information from the AI where they just say, it's not like the fate of all biological life hinges on what happens or anything. Is that just the AI being like, well, I'm doing something that does have the fate of all biological life hinging on it, so this quest isn't? Or is that the AI being like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Carl, fix this? It'll be fun to watch what happens. And Carl says, thinking about all of the pain and suffering inflicted by this dungeon, he's gonna make solving this quest a priority. And the reward for finishing this quest is that Carl gets to pick 2 stand-ins to go to the 11th floor, the arena. Oh, and also that sentient sock mace thing that Dong has, apparently he's becoming addicted to it, and it's doing something weird with his brain, and when he's separated from it, something happens to Dong. So that's weird and creepy, and I hope they figure that out. And then this is the one thing that I found really interesting and is starting to get me excited to keep reading this book, is the interview with Plenty of Plenty. Apparently Carl and Donut are going on this interview with the leadership of the Plenty. That's really cool and important. We don't find that out until mid-interview. But backing it up a little bit, they meet with Lexus. We find out that the Open Intellect Action Network, who dropped the word pacifist from their organization, took over the entire surface of the planet and all the surrounding system within a day because they had the superpowered weapons and the AI expanded its containment and nobody else brought those types of weapons with them. Which I find a little bit really they didn't bring all that with them? Or were they prevented from bringing that with them? We also hear that they're in contact with Katya. They find out that there's a goddess protecting the Kinder facility. So that's pretty cool. I wonder if it's the same goddess that sent Katya up there, because, right, she's like, oh, I can sense them, but I can't get to them. It would be cool if, like, she started to, like, become aware and of the containment expanding and went up there. And apparently Victory is in Florida dealing with the natives. But by the time that Carl and Donut get to go on the show, Lexus, in the middle of talking about this, kind of like stops, and I wonder if she gets like pinged by the AI. But something comes up on her screen that Carl sees, and it's a picture of a child and like some words that he couldn't read, and she gets really, really scared. So I'm wondering, like, is that her kid? Is she being threatened with like the life of her child? Is it the AI? Is it somebody else? I don't know what's going on here. And then going into the actual interview portion, the tunnel project is described as opening the veins of the galaxy. That's an interesting like way to describe it. They're not just tunnel systems for communications. They are the veins of the galaxy, as if the galaxy is a living organism itself. And during the interview, Carl gets an answer of what Justice Light actually did. And he broke the nothing. And apparently a bunch of what was trapped in the nothing are now on the 12th, 15th, and 18th floors. Which also, earlier in Heat 1, we learned that the Club Scolopendra is actually inside the centipede. And that none of the Outworlders are allowed to die. And they're getting tortured over and over and over again by these things that escape the nothing. And, you know, pretty much like Growler Gary times infinity. There's apparently something called the Dread Kyriap. And the Caprid explaining this gets cut off when he says that the Krikaran Prime, which is a parody of their partner, was doing something, and he found it interesting, but he got cut off by one of the other Caprids, who apparently, we find out later, is the matriarch of the whole system. So I'm just really interested what's happening with her and what that would relate to, like, in the real world. And it's kind of at this moment that Victory and Oren try to talk to Carl. Like, this is when Carl finds out that it's the leadership of the Plenty, and they want him to ask them about the tunnel system and, you know, why they're not, you know, responding to them. Because apparently the AI's containment, that zone, is spreading throughout the tunnels. And so now these gods can travel to, like, where the tunnels are and be in the real world now. So real citizens are being affected and could be hunted down by these gods. And when Carl brings it up, he does it in a very direct way and causes a mass panic. The Caprid starts screaming about, you know, the Epicure and the Great Stampede. One even says a beautiful place. They're all freaking out. Apparently this is like a sign of heralding the end. And I think it's funny and fitting that the matriarch judges Carl, right? Judgment. And very accurately calling him, you know, loud and sudden and impulsive. And that, you know, he kind of took away her ability to go about it slowly and thoughtfully. And then we find out that, you know, it's not just Pony. It's kind of all Caprids. That race has that emotional outburst. Because the next thing she does is she's just like, you guys are doing such a good job. And Donut's so sassy. And we really wanted to meet you. And you're best friends with our champion. And, it's terrifying and cute. I felt sorry for her in that moment because she was trying to do something nice and kind of backfired. Like, just the quirks of their race, the way that they react and behave, and just learning that, you know, part of that quirk, like part of Pony's quirks is because of he's a Caprid. And then we get Harbinger. Remember Harbinger, the liaison? He shows up, tries to murder Carl. The AI isn't having it and blows him up. So that's But interesting is that he drops a pulse rifle, and we get the description of him dropping it. And I wonder if Carl picks it up. We just get bounced out of there right afterwards. So I wonder if Carl now has a pulse rifle in his inventory. After that really interesting, you know, interview, and I love the interviews. It's a glance into the outside world and, you know, not just the dungeon. So this is where it started to pick up for me, a bit. But right after that, we're just thrown into the next race again. And yes, we have entertaining moments. What the audience voted on for the upgrade is a chair for Donut. It's like the ultimate princess diamond blah 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 pamper chair. And the chair actually works to protect Donut. So that's actually a really cool upgrade. Probably not what they would have picked themselves, but it could have been a lot worse. We also get Gluteus, who said that he'd drive, but then he takes some Outworlder drugs that Samantha found in, Rishi's pile of junk. Craziness ensues, of course. The AI makes a comment about cultural appropriation. Donut, we get to read that book, the voodoo book, how the crawlers wrote nice notes and gave Carl and Donut each some spells. I love that we get to see those notes now. It almost makes up for not hearing more of the cookbook authors because we only went up to the 10th one. Almost. Not quite. I really hope we get more someday. But anyway, they cast a spell called Temporary Macaroni, where they just get to drive in tubes of pasta as protection. I mean, just ridiculous. After that, really interesting and high stakes information dump at that interview. Now we've got them, a drugged out stripper driving a race car through tubes of spaghetti trying to run from culturally appropriated sugar skull hermit crabs. I think in the beginning I didn't care. It was funny, but I was more interested in the nitty gritty and the serious stuff. And I still feel that way, but I like that the juxtaposition is it's kind of clicking more for me now. And the race ends by Dwight, shooting at Carl and shooting the Mantars, and then they all get in this big wreck at the end. And yay, Carl and Donut win. But Carl is beat up. Carl is broken. Carl needs potions and spells and potions. And he is described as getting up with a broken pelvis trying to crawl his way to Donut. And Donut's fine. Because Carl still hasn't it hasn't sunk in yet that Donut is such a high level. Her constitution is so high now, and she also is wrapped in that chair that's, I think, pretty protective. He is so worried about her, and it's just not clicking that she is so strong and has a high constitution and is so powerful right now that she's the one who needs to be protecting him. I think it's also a cute tidbit that Joshua, one of the bugbears, goes to save Gluteus or get Gluteus out of the wreck. The fact that, the NPC thought of the NPC. I think that says a lot about his character. And right after the second race, Carl gets a note from Akuma, the head of the War Mage Rebellion from the last floor, telling Carl that he needs to kill 2 NPC teams and then come see him for the next race. Carl doesn't trust it, and that isn't his plan. But at the end of the race, 2 NPC teams did end up dying. The Wild Hunt, the Razor Foxes, and the Jugglers. And it also turns out that the Razor Foxes wanted to kill Carl and Donut next race and were trying to get the Bugbears to help them. So, I mean, I'm a little bit into the 4th heat now, the part where Eris is, and that I'm loving. I am loving that whole thing. So I think that the rest of the book is going to go by pretty quickly for me if there's more of that kind of stuff. I just think the setup for this, personally for me, just was so slow just because I'm not a, NASCAR type of person. And, yeah, missed all the other characters and just, I feel it feels low stakes because Carl and Donut are going to win. Even if everybody else were to die, we're not watching the races. It's just a slow start for me. But now all this stuff with the Plenty of Plenty interview, and now this with Eris appearing and talking to Carl and everything she's saying. Love it. Very excited. So I'll check back later when I finish Heat 4, maybe also Heat 5, and update you then.